Everywhere I look these days, organizations are diving headfirst into AI and automation projects, chasing those big someday returns. But what if there's gold sitting right under our noses, something that could deliver real value right now? And there absolutely is. It's something your business already has in abundance, but probably doesn't fully understand. It's your communication data. And I'm not talking about dusty call logs or boring billing reports, although those are valuable. I'm talking about the rich behavioral intelligence hidden in your communications, all those customer interactions that tell the real story of how your business actually works. I mean, think about it. Hundreds, maybe thousands of calls flow through your business every day. They are your lifeline. But beyond counting them, what do we really know about what's happening? Your communication systems are hiding insights that are literally costing you money. And what fascinates me, and what I'm going to explore with Victor today, is just how valuable this overlooked data stream really is. For instance, did you know that your reports might be using completely different definitions of abandoned calls? Or that you might be putting your customers through the exact same frustration hoops that drive you crazy as a consumer? Maybe you're racking up charges from security issues that you can't see, or paying to move data that doesn't even exist anymore. These aren't small problems. They are hidden issues affecting your customer satisfaction and your bottom line. Whether you're running traditional call manager, cloud platforms, or something in between, say hybrid, well, these blind spots are everywhere. And that's what we're uncovering today. I'm Robb Boyd, and I brought in telephony expert Victor Vrba. He is Variphy's Director of Engineering. And with his 20 years in the trenches, he knows exactly how to find value in this overlooked data. So let's discover what your communication systems aren't telling you and how to change that. It's fascinating to trace how our relationship with call data has evolved over the years. When I first started in this industry, call reporting was all about dollars and cents, long distance charges, trunk utilization, basic infrastructure costs. But when I spoke with Victor about how call analytics has transformed over time, he painted a picture of a dramatic shift in focus.
I've been in this business for about 20 years, so I've seen kind of the evolution of call analytics. Way before SIP trunks were around, everything was cost oriented. How do we charge back for our calls? How is billing work? Things like capacity utilization were super relevant, but it was very much like, hey, how is the cost associated? Inbound calls, outbound calls, international calls. It was very much focused around that ROI, based on the cost. And that's how it was for a long time. It wasn't super heavy on the business analytics. It wasn't super heavy on what we see it as now, as in a way for customers to gauge not only kind of how employees are performing, but also how a customer's experience is being handled. 10 years ago, that wasn't the biggest focus.
Think about that transformation from simply tracking costs to understanding customer experiences. It represents a fundamental shift in how we view these systems. As organizations moved to SIP trunking and IP-based calling, the cost equation, it changed dramatically. Suddenly, those detailed long-distance reports just weren't as critical.
That shifted probably about maybe 8 years ago. We started seeing people realize that, costing is not as important as it was before, as people moved into SIP trunking and IP-based phone calls. And they started looking at it and just understanding that, there's a lot more here than what we were using it for. And that's where we got into almost less about costing and more about business analytics. More about, what is my customer's experience? How many people are actually sitting on hold at a given time? How long are they sitting at hold a given time? How long are they willing to sit on hold before they hang up and decide they're going to call a different company?
And here's where things get interesting. Despite this evolution and how we think about call data, there are still critical blind spots that exist across all communication platforms, whether you're running Call Manager on-prem or any of the big cloud solutions.
So I would say the number one common blind spot we see across really all of the cloud vendors, as well as with the on-prem software systems as well, is role-based access. And that's the ability to limit what somebody's allowed to see. So all of the systems that are really out there, it's kind of, you get everything. If I'm giving, the general maintenance manager access to reports because he needs to run reports on his people or, his groups, I'm giving them access to everybody's data. And that's probably one of the biggest blind spots because, we work a lot with hospitality and hospitals, things like that, as well as government. And I can't give Victor access to software and allow him to run reports on potential patient calls or other doctors' calls or in government, different facets of the government calls. So one of the biggest blind spots is definitely the role-based access. You just can't do it. You have to, especially this day and age, you can't just give somebody access to the whole kitchen sink. You have to be able to limit what they're allowed to see.
This isn't just a theoretical security risk. For organizations in healthcare, financial services, or government sectors, it creates serious compliance vulnerabilities that could lead to regulatory penalties. And then there's the accuracy problem. Would you believe that every platform calculates even the most fundamental metrics differently?
I'll use one platform, and I won't name them by name. What they look at as an abandoned call is not necessarily what anybody would consider to be an abandoned call, and I'll give you an example. A call comes into, I'll say, a hunt group, and it rings out, nobody answers it. In a lot of these situations, it'll roll to a secondary hunt group where it rings more people, and then maybe a third or fourth hunt group, and it rings more and more people. Let's say it never gets answered. This particular phone vendor, every time it rings to another hunt group, they look at the first leg of the call as being abandoned. In other words, it didn't get answered at the first hunt group, so it's an abandoned call. Well, then it rolled to the second one. They didn't answer it, so it's another abandoned call. Well, then it rolled to the third one. It didn't get answered, so it's another abandoned call. Well, now you've got one call with 3 abandoned calls, and that's not accurate.
That's not just a minor discrepancy. This is the kind of fundamental miscalculation that can lead to massive errors in staffing, resource allocation, and system design. And here's another complication. Most organizations today aren't running on a single platform. They've got a mix of solutions serving different needs, different departments, different functions. This multi-platform reality creates even more challenges for visibility.
We see environments constantly, daily, that have more than one platform. They may have Zoom and Teams. Literally just with a customer today that has 7,000 Teams users and 7,000 Zoom users. They are not switching platforms. They're not going from one or the other, but they need to be able to track both of them. They want them all in one place. Nobody wants to have to go to Microsoft to run reports or Zoom to run another report, or even a platform that's maybe another analytics to run a Microsoft report, but then still have to punt to a different solution for Zoom. So it's common that people are going to have multiple platforms.
So what happens when you combine these blind spots, limited access controls, calculation errors, platform silos, with a real-world complexity? Well, you get hidden problems that can significantly impact your business.
One of the things that we brought up, and this is this widget over here on the right-hand side, which is abnormally terminated calls, is probably one of the first widgets I always build when we do proof of concepts, or even if we're spinning up a customer, because it really sheds light on things in their environment that most people don't know that is going on. However, I will say probably about 80% of environments have some kind of bad routing taking place.
That's not a minor issue. It's a systemic problem that could be happening in your environment right now. And these routing issues can have major impacts.
To give you an idea of how vast this could be, this customer that I'm working with, like I said, mid-range customer, I would say if I had to estimate, based on their volume, they probably did maybe about 30,000 call rows a day. I spec'd out their original system. We spec it based on call volume, how much data they want to store. Well, they came back to us, I kid you not, maybe a month later, and they're like, this system is slow. It's just not doing anything. We could barely get reports to run. So we start looking at it, and what should have been maybe 20, 30,000 calls a day was well over 2 million calls a day because they had their routing misconfigured. Now think of the impact that that's having on your phone system, which is pretty big. And that not even just the impact it's having on your customers, but the impact it's having on your phone system.
Despite today's focus on customer experience metrics, the financial side still matters. There's significant money to be saved through proper visibility into your systems. Many organizations are unknowingly overspending because they've missed a crucial aspect of their technology evolution.
So even though you move to a SIP environment, it's not that you could just forget about capacity utilization, which unfortunately a lot of people have until we really start talking about it. And they're like, oh yeah, I wonder who manages that. So definitely we have had customers that we've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars on by reviewing their capacity and realizing that they were way, way, way over capacity compared to where their environment was before to where it is now.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings just by having the right visibility into actual system usage. This is exactly the kind of hidden value that we're talking about. It's already there in your system, just waiting to be discovered. Well, when we come back, we're going to explore how organizations are transforming this raw data into actionable insights that drive real business improvements. So far, we've established that there's valuable intelligence hiding in your call data. But finding that data is only half the battle. The real power comes when you transform those raw numbers into actionable insights. One of the biggest challenges organizations face is determining what good actually looks like. I mean, is a 10% abandonment rate acceptable? What about a 20% rate? Without context, these numbers are they're just numbers.
I can see that we're abandoning about 17% of our calls in a week. Is that an acceptable tolerance? Well, if I only handle
good or bad, who knows?
2 calls or 3 calls, well, I'm losing a lot of volume there. But if we handle 20,000 calls, 17% may be an acceptable tolerance. But how do you know that? I didn't even know what that number is before getting a system like ours. Where we're going to come in is we're going to say, okay, this is where you're at now. This is how long people are willing to sit on hold. Right here, I'm looking at abandoned percent. I can easily go ahead and add the average amount of time before they abandon, which is an absolute great value because that's going to show me how long my customers are currently willing to wait. So essentially, by taking those metrics, I am developing what I want my threshold to be. So in this case, I can see that people are willing to hang out for about 57 seconds before they abandon a call. That's a huge value because for me as a customer service representative or a manager, I want to say, okay, I need to be able to get below this number. How can I do that?
Well, think about that. Instead of arbitrarily setting a goal of answering calls within, say, 30 seconds, because that's what some industry report recommended, you can look at your actual customer behavior. If your customers are willing to wait 57 seconds before they give up, that becomes your critical threshold, backed by real data, not assumptions. This data-driven approach to setting benchmarks gives you targets that make sense for your specific business, not generic industry averages that might be completely irrelevant to your situation. What if you could follow a single call from the moment it enters your system until the moment it ends? You could see every transfer, every hold, every interaction. Well, that end-to-end visibility is what Victor calls cradle-to-grave reporting, and it reveals insights that you simply can't get any other way.
Well, let's say there was a malicious call and you need to track that call down. You need to figure out, well, how did they get into my system? You need to figure out, how they routed. Did they route around my system? Did they talk to anybody? If they did, who did they talk to? Did they get transferred around? What Cradle to Grave does is it gives us the ability to follow the call as it kind of bounces through your applications. When we talk about all those different rows, we see these are each one of these rows. Now, somewhere in this data set, each one of these rows resides. Somewhere, along with a lot of other data sets. What we're doing with Cradle to Grave is we're taking that person's call and we're piecing it together step by step in chronological order. We're saying, okay, you know what? This is Victor's call. Here it came in, it went to a route point, and they went to an auto attendant. From the auto attendant, they hit an option. And this is actually a good example why I'll bring this one up, because it shows that they went to contact center. From contact center, it shows who they talked to and how long they talked. And then what we also get to see here, and this is always important for anybody with contact center information, is it also shows what happens after they left the contact center. If you're just relying on contact center data, the call ends at contact center. You don't get to see what happened before it hit contact center or after contact center.
This is like getting X-ray vision into your call flow. Most systems show you isolated fragments of a call's journey. You might see that it entered your auto attendant or that an agent handled it for 3 minutes, but what happened before or after that? Where did the caller go next? How many transfers did they endure before getting resolution? See, without this complete picture, you're making decisions based on partial information, like trying to diagnose an engine problem by only looking at the fuel pump. There's something even more powerful than retrospective analysis. It's catching problems as they happen, or even before they impact your business. Modern call analytics have evolved to provide proactive monitoring and real-time alerts that can prevent major issues.
Our system does alerts also, so we can alert on things like, suspicious dialing patterns, things like that. We had a customer that has alerts set up on their system for toll fraud. They got a message on, it was a Friday night or a Saturday night in the evening that said, hey, a toll fraud call is being placed through your Verify system. That was an alert. So, here they are in their pajamas. They jump into Verify and they look at one of the dashboards that they have set up to kind of help monitor for toll fraud. By the time they got the message to within an hour or so, there were, hundreds of toll log calls attempting to get out. Now, a lot of them were actually getting out. They were actually able to get in touch with their phone carrier, stop the fraud right off the bat. But they still racked up more than a couple $1,000s in the matter of just an hour. And that's
so if you didn't have an early warning system,
nope.
You're not going to find out about that until you get your bill 30 plus days later.
That's what they said. Yeah. Now, they may have caught it on Monday, depending on what was going on, possibly. But they would have caught it because they had a Variphy system. Yeah. But if they didn't have the alerts, they came back to us and they're like, you guys saved us easily over a couple $100,000 by catching this. Because if it would have went all weekend, the bill would have been astronomical. Now, they caught it early enough. It was a couple $1,000s. They worked it out with their carrier, so they didn't end up having to pay for it. But I guarantee the carrier would have had a different conversation if it were a couple $100,000 worth a couple $1,000.
That's the difference between catching a problem early versus discovering it, after the damage is done. And this is just one example of proactive monitoring. The same principles apply to detecting unusual call patterns that might indicate routing problems, system misconfigurations, or even social engineering attempts targeting your organization. These capabilities represent a quantum leap from traditional call reporting. Instead of looking backwards at what happened last month, you're getting real-time intelligence that lets you prevent problems before they escalate into crisis. When we return, we'll explore how these same analytics tools can transform another critical area, planning and executing system migrations and changes. Let's talk about system migrations. Whether you're moving from on-premise to cloud, consolidating multiple platforms, or maybe just upgrading to a newer version, these transitions are among the most stressful projects you're going to face. The stakes are high, right? The timelines are usually overly tight, and everyone from the CEO to the newest customer service agent depends on getting it right. But what if I told you that many migrations are, unnecessarily complex and expensive because they're planned based on incomplete information?
Our customers will come to us and they'll be like, oh, we're thinking about, this platform or that platform. And, we've got our partner that's going to come in and tell us what we would need and how much it's going to cost to move things. And, essentially what those partners are looking at is they're looking at the programming in the current environment. You have X amount of phones, you have X amount of auto attendants set up, you've got X amount of hunt groups and users. And this is what it's going to cost for us to take that and move it all over to your new environment.
Assumption being that configuration represents the best thing for your business.
You got it. Assumption is a good word. Assumption being that, it's the best thing and it's still relevant. We've talked, and I've mentioned this a couple times, is, these phone systems that are out there, whether you're coming from legacy or whether you're coming from like a call manager or something like that, they've been out there for years. They've changed hands. There is a lot of stuff in those call managers that may not even be relevant anymore. We see, hundreds of thousands of phones that are still programmed in phone systems that aren't even there anymore. We see things that just aren't being used anymore, auto attendants and voicemails that somebody is going to charge you to move.
Think about that. Paying to migrate phones that don't exist anymore, auto attendants no one has called in years, or voice mailboxes for employees who've left the company long ago. It's not just wasteful, it's introducing unnecessary complexity into your new environment, and that's before you even get started.
When you are getting ready to move your house to a new location, you want to make sure you get rid of all the garbage first, because you don't want to pay the movers to move the garbage. So how we come in is we help them get rid of that garbage. So that way, when that VAR or that partner is going to come in and move, they've actually got data to say, this is what we should be moving. This is how we should move it. Case in point is your vendor that's giving you that quote. They're not looking at call detail. They're not looking to see what phones have actually placed calls or received calls. They're just looking if the phone is programmed. That's not good, because if you're a larger or to a mid-sized infrastructure that's been running for 15 years, I guarantee you've got phones in your system, potentially thousands of them, that you don't need to move.
This data-driven approach to migration planning can dramatically reduce both cost and risk. Instead of blindly moving everything in your current system, you identify what's actually being used, what's truly needed, and what can be safely left behind. The result is a cleaner, more efficient new environment and a migration process that's faster and less expensive. Well, let's talk about hardware for a moment. When planning a migration, particularly the cloud platforms, a common assumption is that you'll need all new phones. And that can represent a significant capital expense. We're talking potentially millions of dollars for larger organizations. But what if many of your existing phones could be repurposed?
Some of the Cisco phones are cloud capable, and you could just move them over to like a Webex. Some of them are not. The only way to really know is to, one, if you still have the original box on the phone, you can look at the version of it. Nobody's got 1,000 boxes of Cisco phones sticking around. But we also have our change management or our as-built reports. They could read all your phones, and then it's going to go ahead and show you what the hardware version and the firmware version on those phones are. So I can look at a report out of Variphy and say, out of these 10,000 phones, these 8,000 of them are cloud capable, and I only have to buy 2,000 phones to move over to my new environment. That's not something that they can get out of the call manager. It's not a report that they can run. It is a manual process unless you have a system like Variphy that's actually going to go out and read that versioning information off the phone.
Say you have 10,000 phones across your organization, and new IP phones cost roughly $300 each. That's a $3 million investment if you replace them all. But if you discover that 80% of your existing phones are compatible with your new platform, you've just saved $2.4 million, simply by having the right information before you started planning. This type of hardware inventory management can dramatically reduce the capital expenditure required for migrations, allowing organizations to maximize the value of their existing investments. Anyone who's managed complex systems knows this truth. Changes are inevitable, and so are the problems caused by changes.
Hey, from yesterday to today, what happened? That's where we are taking that picture of your phone system and saying, this is how everything is configured now. And then maybe an hour later, I want to say, well, how's everything configured now? What we're going to do is we're going to take that picture that we took an hour ago. We're going to compare it to your live environment and say, hey, these are all the changes that took place in the last hour.
This capability provides an essential safety net during migrations and other changes. If something goes wrong, and let's be honest, something always does, you can quickly identify exactly what changed and roll it back to a working state. It also creates accountability by tracking who made specific changes and when.
We've had a lot of people leverage this. And it's funny because actually Cisco uses our audit tool to track changes within all of their infrastructures, see who's making those changes. But they also use it to cross-compare differences after upgrades to make sure that, the I's and T's are still dotted and crossed after they move versions.
When the company that makes the system is using your tools to manage their own environments, that's about as strong as an endorsement as you can get. Next up, we'll look at some real-world examples of how organizations have transformed their operations by unlocking the hidden value in their call data. Throughout our explanation of call analytics, we've touched on various technical capabilities and strategic approaches. But the real test of any technology is the impact it has on actual organizations. By providing visibility into actual capacity utilization, organizations can eliminate unnecessary spending while still ensuring that they have the resources needed to handle their call volumes. Yet another example of how the right data can directly impact the bottom line.
We had a healthcare industry. They were looking at it. They didn't really have a good understanding of how their calls were being handled. We showed them they were at a 30% abandonment rate. And to boot, on top of it, people were willing to hang out for 4 to 5 minutes before abandoning that call. We worked with them to provide meaningful reports. We worked with them to show kind of operator reports, but also kind of punted back to some of that capacity to show them. And this was not a call queue. So this was not like a contact center where people were sitting on hold and you have all these different options to do things. This was basically just a regular hunt group that people were going to. They were looking at it and going, what can we do better? We made some recommendations, secondary hunt groups that ring on another group of people after a certain amount of time, but they were able to do that. So they implemented some strategies within their call manager to help bring that abandonment rate down to about 12%, but also bring the amount of time that those people were kind of waiting down to less than 2 minutes. So by looking at the data that they had, they added additional hunt groups into their main hunt group.
Let's put this in perspective. This healthcare provider was losing nearly 1/3 of all incoming calls. That's potential patients who need care but couldn't get through. By making data-driven adjustments to their call routing, they reduced their abandonment rates from 30% to 12%, cutting wait times from 5 minutes to less than 2. And this isn't just an operational improvement. It directly impacts patient care and the organization's bottom line. More answered calls means more scheduled appointments, better patient outcomes, and increased revenue, all from unlocking insights that were hiding in their call data all along. Well, we just took quite a journey through the hidden world of communication data, didn't we? Well, after talking with Victor, I think we can all see that there's real value hiding in plain sight. Those call logs and billing reports you've been collecting, they're actually packed with insights about how your business really works. The truth is, when you can't see accurate abandonment rates or spot security threats, it's actually costing you money. And this is where Variphy shines. They've spent 2 decades perfecting their analytics for unified communications, especially in Cisco environments. They take all that raw data and turn it into something that you can actually use, showing you customer patterns and bottlenecks that you never knew existed. I mean, think about that healthcare provider who transformed patient access, or the company that saved hundreds of thousands by catching toll fraud. Well, these aren't just technical wins, they directly boost your bottom line. Your communication system tells the real story of your business, how your customers interact, how your operations flow, what's working, and of course, what isn't. And all those insights are just waiting to be discovered. So maybe it's time to stop guessing and start knowing. Why not try Variphy's free trial or schedule a demo with your own data? Just head over to Variphy.com and see how quickly those hidden communication insights can start driving real returns for your business.